little known fact about me, I love listening to analog radio. And I still listen to analog radio. And before you ask, oh, what is analog radio? The good old AM FM radio, that old thing. Yeah, I love it. I love listening to it. Like back in the day, listening to it on my old boom box, just while I was doing something else, playing a video game, chilling at home, making food, eating food, whatever. Back when I actually had a working boombox. But yeah, I love that. Also, I loved, going to one of my friends' houses and, just listening to his stereo, listen to the radio on the stereo while we played video games or just sat there and talked. I loved that. It was one of my favorite things to do, and it still is, listening to analog radio. It's one of my preferred methods to listen to music, to be honest, sometimes. Though I don't get to do it at home so much anymore because of, like I said, my boombox. I don't have a working boombox or stereo or anything at the moment. But yeah, anyways, I digress. I also love listening to, analog radio while in the car. It's pretty much the only way I get to do it nowadays. While I'm in the car, while I'm, traveling, going somewhere. I love it. It it brings me joy. Something about it is there's a certain kind of vibe it brings. Certain kind of feeling. It just makes me happy. It makes me content. And I enjoy it. And I think it has a lot to do with, the overall realness of analog radio. The overall authenticness or authenticity of analog radio. It's real. It feels real. It feels more real than, other ways of listening to music nowadays. It feels more real. It feels more authentic. It feels more human. Because there's actual human beings that run in the radio stations, usually. And, they're selecting songs, they're picking the songs, and they make a little banter and commentary in between songs, and I love that shit. And and also they do little, like, I don't know what to call them, talk show things or little bits or whatever. Little, I'm not going to say commercials, but little programs, I guess, And it's that kind of shit I love too, because it's actual human beings. It feels real, it feels authentic, it feels human, and I love that. It's the vibes, overall vibes, overall soul, humanity, authenticity, realness. I love that. I love all of that about analog radio. And another thing I love about analog radio is the spontaneous nature of it all. Like, you don't get to pick what you listen to. You don't. It's whatever's on that particular station. You don't get to pick. And if you don't like whatever's on a particular station, you go to another station until you find, what you want to listen to, what you like. What sounds good to you. Sometimes you end up just having to settle for something, which, yeah. But still, I love that. I love not knowing what you're going to stumble across, you know, when you're listening to the radio. It could be a song you haven't heard in years, it could be a brand new song to you that you end up loving and you want to, check out later, It could be, anything. Anything. And I love that. I love the possibility of anything. And I think, yeah, it's just, I love that. I love the spontaneous nature, the random nature of, analog radio. You never know what you're going to hear. You could discover a new song that you love. You could rediscover or an old song from the past that you forgot about. Or whatever, you never know. And I love that. And I know, some people are going to say, oh, it's kind of tiresome and annoying to, constantly have to switch stations to find something you want to listen to and blah, 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 blah. I know. And yeah, it is a little bit. But honestly, it's worth it in the end because, the potential of, finding something new or finding something old and forgotten that you know, it's just, it's worth it in the end. It's worth the slight annoyance and tiresome whatever. It's worth it in the end. But yeah. And I know all of this makes me sound kind of boomerish and like an old person, And I know. But here's something that's going to make me sound even more like a boomer and an old person. Sometimes when I talk to some of my online friends and whatnot, and we get to talking about music and songs and stuff, and sometimes I will say, "Oh, I heard this song on the radio," and sometimes they'll have a reaction like I'm some sort of old person or boomer still listening to the radio, And I honestly, I don't know. I don't like that. I don't never really like that. I never really liked, people thinking that. Just because I still love listening to analog radio in the car, whatever, doesn't make me an old person, doesn't make me a boomer. It's just what I'm used to, That's how I see it. It's what I'm used to. It's what I grew up with. It's what I grew to love. It's what it's what I was raised with, It's what I love and it's what I enjoy, It's what I'm comfortable with. It's a preference, really, But yeah. And usually when these people have these kind of reactions, call me a boomer or an old person or whatever, still listen to the radio, blah, blah, blah. Usually I ask them, oh, how do you listen to music in the car? What do you do? And of course you know what it is. It's all on their phones, connecting it with Bluetooth and Spotify and, it's all that. Which I have nothing against that. I have nothing against Spotify in general either. I use Spotify when I'm at home now since, like I said, I don't have a working boombox, and Spotify is convenient. It really is. But, yeah. I have no problems with that. Or people doing it. I'm not going to tell anyone not to do it. Or you're wrong to do it or whatever. No. If you want to do it, if it's what you're used to, it's what you like, it's what you enjoy, your preferred way to listen to music in the car or whatever, do it. Do it. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. I'm not going to stop you. But yeah. But it's just, I don't know. For me, though, I have tried that. I have, tried hooking up my phone and Spotify up to the car and everything, and I tried it, and it's just, I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me. Something about it feels off. It doesn't feel like it lacks soul. It lacks personality. It lacks, authenticity. It lacks realness. It lacks, it lacks all those things. Doing it that way, at least for me, And I always felt like that. And I always try to, explain that to people. But some people will still just say, "Oh, you're just a, you know, boomer, an old person stuck in their times. You don't want to change or anything." It's not the fact that I don't want to change. It's just I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing now, so I don't feel like I have to change my ways or whatever. But yeah, and yeah, and I guess to end this, I really, really hope that analog radio or analog radio in the car especially never gets phased out, because I feel like maybe we're heading that way, but I hope not. I hope it still, is a thing. Even if it's not as used as much, I hope it still remains a thing in cars. Analog radio, AM, FM radio, whatever. I hope it still remains a thing in cars. No matter what, no matter if it doesn't get used as much or whatever. I hope it still remains there. I hope it never gets phased out for all the digital stuff. Because I don't know, I feel like it'll be a sad day when or if that ever happens. Because I don't know, it'll be sad to me at least, and I'll miss it dearly. I really will. But yeah, I guess that's just me. All this thing is just me. I don't know if this is a boomer. All this is just a boomer thing or a boomer take or an old person take or whatever. I don't know. You can think what you want, but it's just what I feel. And yeah, I just felt like talking about all this stuff for some reason. Probably rambled on for too long, but it is what it is.